Welcome to the Arts and Oddities podcast with A.M. Hall, starring A.M. Hall. Now, here is A.M. Hall.
Welcome to Art and Oddities with A.M. Hall, where I talk about anything that strikes my fancy, to include all kinds of creative works, from children's cartoons to underground zines, to identity politics and everything in between. My guests and I will discuss how art impacts and reflects culture and counterculture, enables individualism and conformity, and have loads of fun along the way. I am your host, A.M. Hall, aka Anthony Bonafini, aka Galena Storm, aka Aquaces Mancuso. This episode, I'll describe the difficulties in making and using a dingus, especially outdoors. Then, in part 2, I'll be speaking with Moss O'Neill, one of the actors in the film I'm making, The Trial of Hephaestus. Stay tuned. Dingus. Noun. Used to refer to something whose name the speaker cannot remember, is unsure of, or is humorously or euphemistically omitting. The dingus. So, we have a dingus in the film we're making. And the basic style of the film is Greco-Roman. Specifically, the characters are Roman, but the overall style of the film is based on ancient Greek theater. And it's often hard to discuss the things that they did in the ancient theater, mostly because we haven't fully recovered from our Puritan roots here in America. And if you've ever seen Evie's art before, Evie certainly does not shy away from classical imagery, especially exaggerated imagery. In a YouTube video that she and I watched about art history, they talked about how the Greek actors would wear, and I quote, leather apparatus to pad physical features. And they did not say exactly what those physical features were. Of course, we're actually going to have those physical features padded out in our show. One of the characters in our film has a large set of artificial breasts and a humorously large phallus. Given American sensibility, no one tends to get worked up about breasts, but they do tend to get worked up about the other thing. So, for the film, we needed two versions. We needed one hard and one soft. We actually already had a hard one. It was made from wood, and so we have used that one as a prop, which we have already filmed the scene. And there is a soft one that is made from cloth. And it's been fairly difficult to create. I have the one soft one is it's not like I'm working from a pattern or something, so we just sort of it's a bit more of a free-form project. Now, the division of labor with regarding to the props of the movie has generally been Evie has done the more sculpty free-form props, where I've done the more ordered ones that are made from cloth. But with this particular structure, Evie made the underlying sculpture of it, but this one is made of cloth, so Evie just sort of passed it off to me and said, here, you work on this. So that's what I'm doing. And I have to cover it with cloth so that it will look a little bit more realistic. And in the process of taking these to the park to film, we decided to come up with a code name, and we have taken it from the old black and white movie, The Maltese Falcon. When it's wrapped up in a blanket, we've been calling it the Dingus. And on our second day of filming, we took the dingus and our actors to a fairly secluded grove so that we could perform with it and use it as a prop. And so we had the dingus. Bring us the dingus! And I brought in the dingus, and all of a sudden, as soon as we had pulled this object out of the cloth wrapping, someone randomly showed up in this secluded grove, and, this was a pretty bedraggled looking gentleman. He, was obviously having a day. He had a sour face on and kind of lanky. He didn't look homeless, but he was certainly not having a very good day. And given the moment that he showed up, we were terribly afraid that he was going to be offended at our dingus. But he just what he did instead was he just grabbed a bag of, I'm not really sure. I think it was apples, or it may have been tennis balls, and then left the grove. So this was someone who, we were afraid he was going to be all offended at what we were doing, but apparently he was just afraid we were going to steal his apples. So the moral of the story is, when making a film, be prepared for anything. Be prepared for anything. This is the world of art. Anyhow, Dingus aside, let's get on with the show. Well, today our plan was to go to the park and do some filming for the film that I keep talking about, The Trial of Hephaestus. But unfortunately, we got rained out today. Even if we were to go to the park, if it cleared up, the ground would be a muddy mess, so it's just not an opportune time. Unfortunately, we didn't put the call out quite in time, so one of our actors is here today. How are you doing, Moss?
I'm well. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing well. So you're my podcast listeners get to hear from one of my actors today. Can you tell me a little bit about when I approached you for the role and your reaction to it?
So basically, Anthony messaged me on Facebook towards the end of my semester at college and asked me if I'd be interested in playing an androgynous demigoddess.
The demigoddess Hermaphroditos.
Yeah, definitely that. And I was really, really happy because the character just seems really, really adorable, and that's how I want to be seen, as just this adorable androgynous creature. And they're also really smart, so it was really flattering to be offered that role.
Yeah, I sent you a script at that time. Did you get around to reading it, or?
I did get around to reading it. I started reading it more once I was finished with the semester, but I did brush up on it during school as well.
I certainly understand not having time to do any fun things for yourself at the end of a semester.
Yeah, I don't know, but it's all worth it at the end.
It certainly is. The play has a lot of big words in it, or the script rather has a lot of big words in it, and it has this poetic language that I know tripped you up a little bit, but it tripped everyone up.
Yeah, and I was really, really nervous and worried about stuttering over words, and that I would seem not very smart when I was reading it and stuff, because there were just certain pronunciations, and I didn't want to seem like I was being insensitive to the religion aspect by mispronouncing stuff.
Right. Well, fortunately, we, have pronunciation guides for that sort of thing. And, the character is a little bit naive. Even though the character is smart, they're only smart in a very narrow set of stuff. Yeah, so the character is, your character, Hermaphroditos, is actually the hero of the story, because this is the only character who goes on a journey to help the king.
Yeah.
So tell me about the overall plot that your character goes through.
So basically, there are marital problems between Hermaphroditos' parents, and they basically go on this journey to help there be a love poem to be written, and they meet up with Erato, and they try to help their parents reconcile.
And where does Erato live?
In the underworld.
The underworld. So poor Hermaphroditos has to go to the underworld, where they know that they will be corrupted.
Basically, it's fun.
And they were, weren't they?
Yeah, that's one way to put it.
So Erato is the muse of erotic poetry, and so, she did what she does, which is, seduce people.
Yep.
We are, of course, kind of dancing around, the subject of what's going on here, but if you want to see all the steamy details, you'll have to wait for the movie. Or we also have an audiobook out, which I believe I have mentioned in the podcast before. Me and Evie and Evie's friend Alex Leisure just sat down and recorded the whole thing one day. That is available. I will put a link to that in the show notes. So, Moss, tell me a little bit about how you feel about your character's costume.
So, to be honest, the breasts were a little bit, difficult for me. I mean, it wasn't, super, super, super dysphoric, but it was definitely, kind of dysphoric because I do have chest dysphoria, but everything else was great. And, I like the robe and I like the makeup.
Well, the only filming we've done so far has been outdoors, so... But we have used one of the Dingus.
Oh, yeah.
How do you feel about that?
It's fun.
Fun.
Yeah.
During the indoor sequences, we will have a different one that you will wear.
Oh, okay.
So there will be, an actual, set of breasts and a dingus.
Nice.
So, hopefully that will be a little bit less dysphoric for you, but it's supposed to look obviously fake.
Right. Yeah, and that's, what I figured. I feel like if it looked more realistic, then it would probably be more dysphoric, but since it was two balloons, it was, funny at the same time.
Mm-hmm. What about... So, I've described this robe extensively on the podcast before. I mean, it's a bathrobe that's been painted to look like a wizard's robe with ginormous sleeves. How do you feel about the robe? Wearing the robe outside?
I like the robe, and I like how it makes me look like sort of a cute little, kid pretending to be a wizard and stuff. It kind of just, adds to, the innocence of the character, I feel.
Mm-hmm. Like Mickey Mouse wearing that ginormous wizard's robe.
Yeah.
But, unlike Mickey Mouse, though, your character is supposed to be the actual wizard. It's not like you're trying to put on a robe that's too big and, fill out your master's role. You are the master. You just haven't grown into the role yet.
Right.
And what about your makeup design? And your hair?
I like the makeup, and I love wearing blue lipstick, and also... I've had a mohawk for a while, I always have part of my head shaved, but I've never really cared enough to style it because I like the whole, raggedy, floppy looking mohawk better, but it was really fun to actually style it, and everybody's so surprised when I say that I've, never styled it before then.
No, you look awesome with a mohawk and a third eye.
Thank you.
It's pretty rad. So, let's go back to the dysphoria you were experiencing with that ginormous set of boobs.
So... I identify as non-binary, specifically agender, but I don't know, internally I feel more masculine leaning most of the time, but I still love to wear makeup and present femme. But anyways, usually I'm lucky enough that my chest is small enough that I can generally put on a baggy shirt when I feel uncomfortable and just kind of pretend that my breasts don't exist. And I don't know, I feel really bad for mask leaning people that have bigger chests because they're not lucky enough to do that. But I don't know, it's hard to ignore two giant balloons taped to your chest.
It really is. I don't know if I've come out to the audience yet or not, but I'm also genderqueer. I'm actually post-op. I have had top surgery, and 90% of my dysphoria is just gone. I love not having boobs anymore. It's the most wonderful feeling in the world. You've actually asked me about it a couple of times.
Yeah, I have.
You've asked me how my surgery went and my experiences with it. So just being non-binary is, oh gosh. I can definitely understand the feeling of, I'm so glad to have had this feature gone from me. Having to strap them back on again, that would just feel really awful, I think. But fortunately, you do wear it really well. It's part of the costume, and you kind of... I think you have that mentality in your head of, I can take this off. It's perfectly fine.
Right, yeah, and that definitely makes it more comforting, and also the fact that they're definitely, unrealistic looking, and they're supposed to be kind of funny.
Yeah, they're supposed to look fake.
Yeah, if they looked real, I feel like that would have made me, more dysphoric, probably.
Probably, yeah. No, my original plan was to actually make them look more realistic, but we decided in the end that it would be funnier if it was just obviously fake. Made out of balloons or made out of pantyhose. So when you have the robe open and exposed, it will look even more fake than when it's closed than what we've done so far. So you'll be able to look down and go, this is really ridiculous.
Right.
So, but getting back to actually one of the theme of the whole film is doing art for art's sake, which is also the theme of the podcast. Isn't that coincidental? But no, art for art's sake, not necessarily because, you want to become a professional artist, but just because it makes your life better.
Right.
What kind of art do you do in your life?
So I like painting and drawing, but mostly I like to crochet and embroider and sew, and I like to get really creative with it and make like monsters and things that people like don't normally think of when they think of crocheting.
Like, what kind of monsters do you make?
I've basically just like taken scraps and made random creatures with whatever I could find and whatever worked together, and just I like to be really abstract with it, and I myself don't even know how a lot of the stuff I'm making is gonna be because it's just scraps and stuff put together.
Do you name any of these creatures or come up with backstories for them once they're done?
No, I don't, but I probably should because that sounds like a good idea.
Okay. And needlework, like you said something like cross stitch or...
Right. So with a lot of the stuff I crochet, I like to just put really trippy, I hate that word trippy, but I don't know how else to explain it, embroider like designs on like the scarves and hats and stuff.
Yeah, I started with cross stitch actually when I was a small child. I think it's one of the reasons I have such great manual dexterity now is because when I was really small, I used to do the hand embroidery.
That's really cool. I think that more kids should get into that stuff now.
Yeah, well, I have really great manual dexterity now, especially in my hands, but I'm terrible with full body stuff, so I mean, there's a give and take. And what kind of paintings do you do?
Depends what I'm in the mood for. I do a lot of really abstract stuff. I like to work with very bright colors. I like doing line work. Like sometimes I'll just like draw a line and make it fill the whole paper without even like picking up the pen, just stuff like that.
That's really neat.
Thank you. A lot of it's just like relaxing for me. I don't really like care about promoting the stuff. It's just stuff I like to do to like soothe my mind, calm.
Do you just like have like abstract works, or do you do representative art, or
Generally, it's just abstract and stuff with experimenting with colors, things like that.
sort of Jackson Pollock throw the paint on the
Right.
thing?
And when I crochet, I love like just experimenting with different textures of yarn, and I love the really like roughly made yarn that's super loopy and stuff.
Oh, cool. Yeah, no, I love to work with those kind of textures. It's when I crochet, I normally make things like things to wear. I'm all about garments, so I make a lot of scarves and mittens and hats. I don't make a lot of hats because crocheted hats don't tend to work to keep the wind off your ears, but I do make them occasionally.
Nice.
So, art for art's sake, you definitely seem to do stuff that relaxes you, makes you feel good. That laid-back approach, is that how you approach playing the character in the film?
Sort of. I like kind of because the whole point of the film is kind of like exaggerating and being silly and just exaggerated emotions sort of and being silly, and
Yeah.
that's I don't know, I like that, but yeah.
Well, you are certainly fun.
Thank
and
you.
You play a fun role, and it's nice to have you around.
Thank you.
And I really hope to have you back on the show again once filming is a little bit further underway.
Right. Well, thank you so much for having me as well.
Yeah, thank you for being here. So, please stay tuned while we wrap up the show. Thanks for listening to the Art and Oddities podcast with A.M. Hall. That's our show for today. If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe and give us a review on either iTunes or Google Play. Or if you're listening via YouTube, please remember to like and subscribe. Direct updates and show notes are available at panicbedlam.com/podcast. That's PANIKBEDLAM.com. You can also follow us on Facebook. Join our group at facebook.com/groups/oddartpodcast or on Twitter on twitter.com/artodditiespod. The production and editing of this podcast has been provided by Reverend Panic Evelyn Bedlam, and without her, it would not exist. If you'd like to support this podcast, please become a patron at patreon.com/panicbedlam. As we produce more shows, we will be putting more content on Patreon exclusively for patrons. You can also help Panic by buying her books, to include a physical copy of The Trial of Hephaestus on lulu.com, or one of her 2 tarot decks available at thegamecrafter.com. You can find them by searching Panic Bedlam on either site. Links will be available in the show notes. Our theme music, Doxal Dance in Spacetime, or Belial and His Seven Wives, was composed and performed by Kion Huru Orion, or as I know him, Michael. Thanks, Michael. If you would like to contact the show with comments or suggestions, you can email us at artodditiespodcast@gmail.com. Mentioned in this episode were both the audiobook version and script for the film I'm making, The Trial of Hephaestus. Links to both will be available in the show notes. Next week, I will tell you all about why I have so many names rattled off at the beginning of the podcast. And I will also sit down with E.W. Motomac once more and have a chat about chaos magic. That about wraps it up. Remember, the highest form of magic is doing, and expressing yourself is art. This is A.M. Hall, signing off.